Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernst Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. The big event that usually kicks off the college basketball season every year for the last decade or so has been the Champions Classic, and it's back again in 2023, and we've got two amazing matchups between the four schools that always play in this event. Duke and Michigan State will be matching up this year, and then you also have the Kansas Jayhawks and the Kentucky Wildcats in the other matchup as well. All four of these teams do play in this event every single year, and they've given us some thriller matchups throughout the seasons that they have played this event since 2011. Last year, Michigan State beat Kentucky in double overtime, 86-77. That was a really good game and a shocking win for an unranked Michigan State team last year over a ranked Kentucky team. And then the Kansas Jayhawks, they beat the Duke Blue Devils 69-64. That was a back and forth game. Both teams played really hard, but you can't really expect anything less from all four of these teams. There's probably going to be really close matchups again, and I'm going to break down both of these games and see which two teams I think will win the Champions Classic this year. Now, obviously, in the first game, you've got the Duke Blue Devils and the Michigan State Spartans kicking off the event this year in the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. It's a neutral site game like it always is, so the home environment is probably not going to really help out either team, even though there is an argument that Michigan State might have some more fans because Michigan is closer to Illinois than Duke is, with a lot of their fans being more on the East Coast. But still, this is an interesting matchup because you talk about in the past years of this event, you used to have four of the most experienced head coaches in college basketball, and John Calipari at Kentucky, Bill Self at Kansas, Tom Izzo at Michigan State, and Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. So the other three guys are still there, but Mike Krzyzewski is gone, and Jon Scheyer, now in his second season as the Duke head coach, he's had some up and downs with the Blue Devils. They were really good last year, winning all their home games, but they didn't go too far in the tournament, and they did not beat Kansas last year in the Champions Classic. Now they're facing a Michigan State team that does have some question marks because Michigan State lost to James Madison to start the year 79-76 in overtime. That was a loss that no one was expecting from a top 5 ranked Michigan State team, and then they bounced back and did beat Southern Indiana. But Michigan State should be 2-0 right now, so who knows where they're going to be ranked when the AP poll comes out. They're probably not going to be ranked in the top 5 or 10 any longer, but still, Michigan State is a team with a lot of hype. They have a lot of talent, and they've got Tom Izzo, and that really helps out Michigan State because he's a guy that always gets his teams to bounce back. They showed that in most seasons when Michigan State suffers an early November loss, they always bounce back and end up having a deep run in the NCAA tournament. So sometimes that just is added fuel for Tom Izzo to get his team prepared and ready to play. And you look at some of the talent they have. Tyson Walker is averaging a lot of points per game this year to start the season. Granted, it is against two small schools, but he's averaging over 20 points per game. He's a good facilitator, but he needs his teammates to step up to the plate and start hitting more shots because by himself he can't do it all. But he is a bucket getter for a really short guard that Michigan State picked up in the transfer portal from Northeastern. He's ended up being a much better player than most people were expecting when he did enter the portal and went to Michigan State. He has been the heart and soul of the Spartans for the last couple years, and he's the only guy averaging over 10 points per game right now for Michigan State. So that's a problem, but at least the other guys do chip in some points and are able to create a scoring balance with the rest of the roster. Guys like Jaden Akins, Malik Hall, Matty Sissoko, and AJ Hoggard are all returnees from last year's team. They don't have Joey Hauser on the roster anymore, but all the guys I just listed are solid players that I do think are going to end up scoring more points per game than they're currently averaging, especially a guy like Jaden Akins who's averaging 8.5 points and AJ Hoggard that's averaging 7.5 points. Both of those guys are going to end up scoring more points per game before the end of the season is done. They're two talented players, and they've had a bit of a slow start to the season, but I do think that they're going to up their game in this big matchup against the Duke Blue Devils because Tom Izzo always puts his players in the best position to win. He always has great game plans for these type of games, and I do think that's going to really help out the Spartans. And you have guys like Jeremy Fears and Xavier Booker who, while freshmen and have struggled to start the year, they're going to get better as the season goes along. Right now, against Duke in the Champions Classic, they're probably not going to be ready for this type of game because they're freshmen, but they are really talented players. Cohen Carr's another freshman that's actually stepped up and played well early on. So Michigan State's got a lot of talent. They don't have as much talent as the Duke Blue Devils, but they have more experience, and they have the more experienced coach in Tom Izzo. But Jon Scheyer, who's learned a lot from Mike Krzyzewski, even though he's a young guy, it's definitely looking like he's going to be a good coach for Duke. He's already a great recruiter, but he's just going to have more time as a head coach to really become one of the best head coaches in college basketball. And he's already done a solid job at Duke. Even though the Duke Blue Devils did lose to Arizona at home, and Jon Scheyer's first home loss as the head coach of the Duke Blue Devils in Cameron Indoor, 78-73. They did beat Dartmouth 92-54 in their first game, so both Duke and Michigan State have one loss. But Kyle Filipowski, he's playing like an NBA player already. He's doing a great job shooting the three. He can drive in the lane. He can get to the foul line. Kyle Filipowski is going to be a big mismatch for Michigan State because even though Michigan State has a couple of decent centers, they do not have a guy that's going to be able to slow him down. Matty Sissoko is going to have a hard time trying to shut down Kyle Filipowski. And then you talk about other guys like Ryan Young and Jeremy Roach, who are really experienced players. Jeremy Roach is a solid point guard. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Tyson Walker-Jeremy Roach matchup works out. And then you've got a lot of talented freshmen like Tyrese Proctor, Sean Stewart, Caleb Foster, and Jared McCain. And you can't forget guys like Jalen Blakes and Mark Mitchell, who are returnees as well. So even though Michigan State has more experience than Duke, Duke has a few guys that are experienced, especially with Ryan Young on the roster, who's a senior, that can really help the freshmen get up to speed while they're still young in college basketball for a big game like this. And Jon Scheyer, again, while he's young, he does not have the experience at head coaching like Tom Izzo does. Mike Krzyzewski has taught him a lot, and you can really see the influence that Mike Krzyzewski's had on Jon Scheyer when you see the Duke Blue Devils play on the floor. I think this is going to be a really good game, and I know that most people do believe that Duke is the more talented team, but Michigan State has talent in their own right, and I really like the fact that they're still a more experienced team than Duke. I definitely could see the Duke Blue Devils winning with Kyle Filipowski playing well, and if Jeremy Roach can win the matchup against Tyson Walker, and then some of the other guys that they have like Mark Mitchell, and then maybe a freshman like Tyrese Proctor can step up, the Blue Devils can win. It's going to be a 50-50 crowd, probably leaning more Michigan State because of the location, but I'm going to go with the Michigan State Spartans to beat the Duke Blue Devils 73-69 in the Champions Classic this year in 2023. I think Tom Izzo's experience over a guy like Jon Scheyer, head coach, is going to be a big difference, and Tyson Walker has been playing great at point guard to start the year, even better than Jeremy Roach has, and I feel like some of the other guys for the Spartans will step up. They have more experience than Duke, and even though Duke's probably more talented, Filipowski's going to ball out. I think that the Michigan State Spartans will win a close one over the Duke Blue Devils in what should be a classic game. And then the other matchup in the Champions Classic this year, you've got the Kansas Jayhawks and the Kentucky Wildcats. Obviously, there is no youth at head coach here. John Calipari's been at Kentucky for over a decade. He's done a great job there. Even though the last few years haven't been as good than the first few seasons for Calipari, still he's done a great job as the Wildcats head coach. And then Kansas, you've got the Hall of Fame coach Bill Self, just like Calipari's a Hall of Famer at Kentucky, but Bill Self, he hasn't started trailing the wrong direction though. He just won a national title back in 2022. He won the one in 2008, so he has 2 national titles under his belt. Calipari does have one back in 2012, but a lot of people still believe that Bill Self's coaching at the top of his game. He's recruiting at a high level, just like John Calipari is, but you can argue that Bill Self has done an even better job because he brings in experience, and sometimes guys that stay a couple years longer than what John Calipari recruits at Kentucky, where most of the guys are one and dones. Because you look at what Kansas has done. They've beaten NC Central 99-56 to start the year, then they beat Manhattan 99-61, so they're flooring the teams that they play. And then you look at how the roster's performing. Hunter Dickinson transferring in from Michigan. He's playing great basketball like we all knew that he would. The top transfer portal guy in the 2023 transfer portal cycle. He has been the stud that Kansas fans were hoping for at the center position. Kevin McCullough, a wing player that has come back for another season of college basketball. He transferred in from Texas Tech a couple years ago. He's playing great basketball. One of the best defenders in college basketball, and his offense is starting to come around as well. He could potentially be an NBA level player if he keeps up this level of play. Elmarco Jackson's a good freshman to pair in the backcourt with DeJuan Harris, who's one of the best facilitators in college basketball. He's averaging close to 10 assists per game right now, which that's probably going to go down a bit as the season goes along and there's more games that's going to be played. But DeJuan Harris, make no mistake, is one of the best facilitating guards in college basketball. KJ Adams is a good forward. Parker Brown's been playing solid, who also transferred in, and he's the brother of Christian Brown. So definitely Kansas's roster is a lot of talent. They have older guys. They've got younger guys. Bill Self is still coaching at the top of his game. It's going to be very tough for Kentucky to win. But don't discredit the Wildcats, because they have already beat New Mexico State 86-46, and they beat Texas A&M Commerce 81-61. And then you look at the star talent that John Calipari is always bringing in. Robert Dillingham, DJ Wagner, Reed Shepard, Justin Edwards. All of these guys are fantastic freshmen. All 5-star guys that are playing really well. Reed Shepard was a high 4-star, but he is from the state of Kentucky, so he's an in-state player, so you know he wants to ball out for Kentucky. Kentucky, and he has so far. And then they've got a couple of experienced players like Antonio Reeves, the guy that transferred in from Illinois State a couple years ago. Trey Mitchell transferred in from West Virginia this offseason after the debacle of an offseason that West Virginia had. So that was a big pickup for Kentucky to get another experienced player. Jordan Burks is another solid freshman. And then Adu Thero, he's a returning guard that actually looks better this year. He's starting to step up a bit, play better basketball. But the key here is, will Kentucky's freshman talent be able to outplay the all-around talent of Kansas? Because they have more experience with Hunter Dickinson, Kevin McCullough, DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, and then you got star freshmen like Elmarco Jackson. Kansas is probably just as talented as Kentucky, even if Kentucky has more guys that will play in the NBA than Kansas, and there's just more experience on the Kansas roster. And Bill Self arguably has been doing a better job coaching up the Kansas Jayhawks than John Calipari has been doing the last couple years at Kentucky. Calipari's a great coach. Definitely don't want to discredit him at all. He's done a great job with the Wildcats, and he's got a lot of talented players, but can those guys, as freshmen, be able to step up in their first big game in college basketball? Guys like DJ Wagner, Robert Dillingham, they've never played in a big game like this before. Just those two games that they've played against New Mexico State, Texas A&M Commerce at Rupp Arena are not going to be enough to prepare them for what Kansas is going to bring. And Kansas has been more dominant than Kentucky in their first two games this season. I think that this is going to be a really good game as well. Always these Champion Classic games are, but I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks to beat the Kentucky Wildcats 79-73. I feel like John Calipari's freshmen will play hard, and they're definitely not going to give up. But I do think that the Kansas Jayhawks will start to pull away a bit in the second half, and Kentucky will fight back late to keep it close. But Kansas will hold on in the end and get the win. And I think that Bill Self, with his more experienced roster, will be able to find a way to get the win. But I'm really looking forward to the Champions Classic this year in 2023. Like I said, it always kicks off the college basketball season in style. It's been doing it since 2011, and all four of these teams are usually really good every year, so they've given us some classic games, and I really went with the experience here. I feel like Tom Izzo, being the experienced head coach that he is and the experienced roster that they have, I feel like they'll be able to beat the more inexperienced Duke Blue Devil team, and John Scheyer is a more inexperienced coach, 73-69. I think that will be a good game, and I feel like Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks, with the more experienced team they have, will be able to knock off the Kentucky Wildcats 79-73. But definitely Kentucky and Duke have talented rosters, and you never know what's going to happen when these games always tip off. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about my picks for the 2023 Champions Classic, and whether you think that the Kansas Jayhawks and the Michigan State Spartans will win, or whether you take the opposite approach and you think Kentucky and Duke will be able to pull out the wins this year in the Champions Classic. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.